What is good, everybody? We are lit, we live, we here. Back with another episode of the 623 Podcast, a podcast where we encourage listeners to wake up to new ways of thinking about fighting games. Of course, I am ATL Riot, joined by Nicholas. How's it going?
What's up? What's up? Good to be back.
Yes, sir. Now, not going to waste any more time. The topic of today is going to be the concept of doing nothing. You hear a lot. Actually, I don't think you really hear it that often when it comes to someone give you info about learning how to approach a situation better. But I know this has been a topic that I've been kind of driving home for the past few weeks over in the One Vision overview VAR review series, and I think it's very important to understand the concept so that when the situation does arise, it is imperative to it's easier to kind of understand what it actually means and what it actually entails to actually do nothing, whether that's be more passive or not necessarily exactly just literally doing nothing, but sometimes it's better to not do something, right? Because at the end of the day, the saying as always goes, that doing nothing is doing something, essentially, right? Now, going into our first point, what exactly is doing nothing? What exactly does that mean, right? When you hear someone say, like in a VAR review, or just saying, explaining to you why they might have done the edge over you, why is it important to do nothing? Doing nothing is essentially just it might be a no-brainer to some people, but again, I think it's one of those things where it's so easy that it can kind of just go over your head, especially when again we're playing fighting games, right? You want to fight, so it's not like it's the first thing in your mind. But doing nothing is essentially taking a step back and assessing the situation, right? It's not slinging your buttons, your biggest move, not kind of just poking, really just sitting there and either, whether it's assessing the situation or letting your opponent do the work. Maybe like how we said earlier a few weeks ago, how you might have the life lead and it's better to play the life lead. So you're going to sit there and let your opponent do the work, right? Maybe it's to take a breather, but finding the time to do nothing or reset will allow for you to reset yourself and your game plan and the situation as a whole, right? Us as fighting games, it's a very mental battle, right? Hence the idea of this podcast. So giving yourself the extra amount of time can honestly make the difference when you're not just, slinging on buttons or playing a constant 50-50 game, a constant scramble. So you essentially let nature take its course, right? That's the most important thing that we're going to be driving home today is just going to be making sure that you are in the mental space to be able to keep forward. But in order to do that, you have to essentially, assess the situation, right? I think it's going to be probably the main point that we're going to be driving home today is just taking your time, essentially, right? Especially if you're playing like an archetype, like a zoner, where you kind of have to play a little bit of a pacemaker type of game, right? You might want to be in a scenario where you're taking control and essentially, letting your opponent do the work for you, right? Letting them run their face into your buttons instead of the other way around. Doing nothing makes it hard for the opponent to guess what you're doing and or going to do. This can pretty much put you in an advantage, especially when your opponent has given you a lot of information and you're depriving them of information, right? So whether it's like it's round 3, last round, maybe you are even about even health. I think even that's a good scenario to even look out for. But obviously the ideal situation is going to be you having the life lead. Maybe it's been a long enough set to where you have all the information that you need, so where you can maybe set something up and kind of just bait a reaction, or maybe a scenario where you kind of did a block string in this exact scenario, but maybe you just down back just for a little bit to kind of let them think that it's their turn. Even small scenarios like that where you might just do nothing. Like when we say do nothing, it's not necessarily you're sitting there for like 10 seconds, right? It could just be for even a few frames. So it really just comes down to the scenario in the game's playing out, whether it's whatever life threshold you have, whatever resources you have, just at certain points to be able to understand when it's okay to kind of just take a step back and let your opponent essentially do all the work for you. Now, I think with that being said, I think one of the best examples that I actually have on file right now is actually going to be a little clip from I mentioned earlier my One Vision overview. It is a VAR review series of pretty much if people are either playing Axel or against Axel, they can pretty much submit their clip, and I go over it for free. Just pretty much, I think is for even since beta, I think it's been 3 years now. There haven't really been a lot of Axel role models or content creators, streamers. There really hasn't been a lot. Even when it was the most active, where you can name a few Axel players off the top of your head, there wasn't really that many. Right, and of course now with the way the patch cycle has gone on, we haven't really seen a lot of we've seen way more drop offs. So I think I really just started doing this to kind of help give direction, right? But I think this is a very important clip to look at now for the audio listeners. There's going to be a clip once again from the Barbie series. Of course, Axel by the name of Calico. Joe Guy, Joe Person. They do a lot of art. They actually made the announcement graphic for the series, so I really appreciate for them for that. Finally, I guess a sim player by the name of Sunny D, also very dominant sim player. Now, situation here is going to be Calico is about, it looks like, was that 40% health? Sunny D is about like 10. Sunny D has their back to the corner currently, and I do remember Calico having pretty much a free win here. Burst is always on the table for Sunny D, but they do have a 100 meter. But if Calico does play this right, then they will be able to secure this round without having to even worry about it. But you will see what happens right now.
Please, oh my God, please relax, please relax. Relax, 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 relax.
So yeah, very classic clip. Very, very, very classic clip. Now for the audio, I know it's gonna sound very wonky for the audio listeners, but I promise there's a point here. I promise there's a point here. So pretty much, right? Let me see if I can actually mute the clip and then play it back, just so that you don't gotta hear me yelling over myself. But so yeah, pretty much. Calico gets the RC into the what used to be the rainwater with the vacuum. Granted, now all Calico really has to do here, right? And again, this is the point that we're jumping home here when it comes to the concept of doing nothing, right? Calico has the opponent, has Sunny D with their back to the corner, right? And Calico playing a zoner, as I mentioned before. This is a pretty ideal spot. Now, this is also before the nerf to some of Sin's buttons, but it's not like it really matters in this scenario anyways, because Sin kind of has to rely on kind of doing balls to the wall, special moves to kind of get in at some points. It's especially strong in the mid-range, which is where Axel wants to play at. So Calico really just has to worry about either Hoof Stomp, which is his overhead move, as well as Elk Hunt, which is his sliding low, right? That hits pretty far, further than Hoof Stomp at least, right? So with that being said, Calico really just has to play around about far slash range or to 2P range to kind of keep them out if they really want to, right? Maybe shimmy a little bit, throw out some 2Ks to kind of stuff out a raw Elk Hunt, right? As I mentioned, the sliding low. Now, it is a dangerous game once again because Sunny D does have some lead here. However, what Calico decides to do is RC and then just spam Rainwater, which is a jump back retreating move, right? That gets beaten by, IEDs, which you've seen before, which all the visual viewers have seen in the clip, right? As well as, now, of course, as I mentioned, Sunny D has full meter. They get the IED, converts straight into super. And yeah, that pretty much guarantees now, guess for a round scenario here for Calico. Pretty well spot, 5% health now. And yeah, Sunny D obviously having the offense. Now, Sin is very confident for Sin players to go for a round of 6K after a hard knockdown, catches backdash, as the visual viewers have also seen in the clip. And Calico does backdash. So it's like it comes in twofold, right? So having their opponent in the corner in a very good spot, right? That all they really have to do is just try to wall out Sunny. Again, Sin doesn't really have the greatest tools for kind of closing the gap that isn't absurdly committal, right? So Calico really having to wall them out and play at that solid mid range where Axel wants to be at, because Axel is a mid range zoner. I know he gets mean off for having full screen normals. I guess a full screen if you have bad eyes, but he's theoretically mid screen, right? So it's a pretty good spot for him to be at, right? But going for the repeated jump back move spam, right? Giving Sunny D a free out because now Sin having pretty solid air buttons, able to clip the rainwater and then converts for a full combo into super, getting the hard knockdown for the wall break. And then once again, as you saw in the clip, Calico wakes up with a backdash, gets clipped by Sin 6K because it is pretty strong for that. And yeah, and then even once again, gets hit by a meaty 2S, right? So I think that is one of the main points here is that just doing nothing could easily give Calico a free win, right? But it's, whether they're feeling antsy or frantic or just, even like we mentioned last week how some people have, they get like a ego boost, so they just do nonsense, right? That no matter what happened there, it played into a part of the demise of the round for Calico, right? And then we see obviously they go to round 3 instead of Calico taking the game. So I think that's gonna be at least my reference point for today. I know Nick has his to share later, but for now, I think that's kind of the main thing. I really just want to hone in. What exactly does it mean to do nothing, right? Because it's a simple concept again, but I think it's so simple that it's hard. One of those things. But I guess Nick, anything you wanna add to I guess your idea of doing nothing before we move on to the next clip or next tip?
At least to me, I mean, you've touched upon a variety of topics regarding what doing nothing means, but I think to paint more of a picture, doing nothing can even vary per archetype. So if you're a grappler, if you're a keep away, as you mentioned,
Yeah.
even for me as someone who plays primarily rushdown characters, doing nothing is quite odd for our archetype. Imagine like a Milia, imagine like a Magneto, imagine like a Yun or Seth in SF4, imagine pretty much any character that you might think of in any fighting game that's uh, the rushdown archetype. They're focused on running you down. They're focused on mixing you up. They're focused on just drowning you in never-ending pressure. But to do nothing, again, it depends on the archetype and it looks different per archetype. So for example, I mean, you've mentioned the example in keep away characters, but for rushdown is different. It's odd for us because again, they're known for rushing down and drowning the opponent. It's almost like a weaponized tool to not do anything. uh like for example, if I'm trying to rush down my opponent, he's in the corner, or I'm trying to put him in the corner, and everyone knows at this point in time, I have to put him in the corner to get advantage. But if I don't do anything, that can create some confusion in my opponent, which might be good if my opponent understands what I'm going to do, or if I'm trying to throw them off. um Again, there's so many ways uh to visualize and to convey uh doing nothing in a fighting game. It might be literally just standing there. It could be just uh jumping aimlessly. It could be just whiffing in normal. But all of which have one thing in common. You're trying to not only deprive your opponent of information, but you're trying to extract information from your opponent as well. So if you're able to successfully deprive do one of those two things or both is great. One of which deprive your opponent of information, or two, extract information from your opponent. This is the whole reason to not do anything. A lot of people are stuck with the clear game plan to just mash buttons, to just rush in with no game plan in mind. um just press all the buttons, just rely on instinct. But when we can take control of those untamed feelings and then just level ourselves and do nothing with with intention, I think people can weaponize this idea of doing nothing, as I mentioned before. But that's what doing nothing means to me. Again, just circling back, it's different per archetype. It could be different from a rushdown character to a grappler. It could look differently, is what I mean. But at the end of the day, you're trying to do one of two things. You're either one or both. You're either one depriving your opponent of information, or two, you're trying to extract information from your opponent. Because when they see that you're not doing anything, it causes curiosity, and so it's natural for your opponent to be like, okay, I got to figure this out. We're all problem solvers at the end of the day. Fighting games are meant to be a problem solving activity, and so when you pique that interest of problem solving by doing nothing, that's your weapon. That's your method of defeat. That's one method of many to defeat your opponent. But that's all I want to mention because you brought up keep away characters, and I thought, you know what, it's actually different per archetype, and let's talk about it. So
Yeah.
that's all I want to bring up.
I think that's the funny thing. Yeah, I know when I was talking about it, I actually had an idea like flicker in my head of, it is slightly different depending on your archetype. I think I kind of alluded to that in our earlier statement. I don't remember, but yeah, it is very slightly different. And even still, even with their archetype, I also mentioned again, like it could even be like if you burst out of a combo, if your opponent bursts, sometimes I just stand there, right? Because it's like, what are you gonna do? You know, it's just pretty much just like taking my time. I don't really need to, get bursted on or use my burst and then just immediately run in. Like it is a get out of jail free card, but it's not like a immediate frame one, pop it and then go 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 go. Sometimes it's just nice to use that split second that you use your get out of jail free card, and then just take a breather, right? But yeah, I guess. Yeah, did you want to add anything else? I'm sorry.
Oh no, that's pretty much it. You can continue.
Word. Now we talked about of course the in-game scenarios and especially with archetypes. But I think one of the biggest things is actually this could also be applied to real life, right? Of course, we're all striving to get better, trying to get more information. I think taking more real life breaks is essential as well. You see a lot of people have a random like Zenkai boost or a random like surge of improvement when they take a break because they're able to recollect all the info that they've gained within sets or watching people, and be able to now have a more clear mind when they're going into back into the game, right? So whether that's VAR viewing we mentioned last week, kind of the same concept honestly, but yeah, using VAR views, watching people, watching your own self back. Even like if you just like hop on, go in training mode, and then get off, that's something else. You can just do regular real life activities. Whether you like play sports or watch movies or something like that. Just making sure you're not, because not all improvement comes from inside the game, right? So sometimes literally not playing the game is the best course of action when you're improving. So I think not only is it important to do nothing and take things slow when you're actually in a real match, but I think when you're actually taking more info within, doing nothing in that sense is good too, right? So essentially, taking breaks can also lead you to have a clear mind and be able to assess where you need to go from where you're at right now. So I think is an important concept to take in here. Did you want to add to that, Nick?
Yeah, you know what? I just, so outside of video games, I think it's important for people to know too, because it's pertinent in, as you said, in life as we know it. But from a psychological point of view, the brain takes a lot of time to absorb information and make synaptic connections. So in neuroscience, in order to learn a new thing, it takes, again, it takes time, but also if you're busy learning too many things at once, you're not going to be learning anything. Your brain needs time to rest, and it needs time to just take a breather, as Riot said. and absorb the information. So when you do take that break, the information, that new game plan, that combo, that mix up, that counterplay, that new mindset, it all takes time to understand and absorb and just see its way into into your head and into your regiment, into your conditioning. Um, but not just in video games, but like in in fitness too, for working out and combat sports, as we talked about in the previous episode. We can't stress enough how important it is to take a break. The muscles need time to rest um and to grow. They only grow through rest, and it's heavily emphasized. If you talk to any personal trainer, if you talk to any bodybuilder, if you talk to any fitness trainer or anyone in that field, they're always going to tell you, are you getting enough rest? And that's what's so important. And we need to ask those questions ourselves when we play video games, when we're learning new things. A lot of people don't like to take a break because some people are just they're too dedicated, and there's nothing wrong with that. But what a lot of people will start to understand is what's stagnating their progress is their ability to not understand that taking breaks is essential. They think it's a good idea, but they don't understand that it's essential. They're two different things. Um, so consider it in your weekly regimen. Take a break, play another game, do something else, find a hobby, go be active, do something, but just again, take a break from that important thing that you're trying to learn.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that was definitely me. It took me a while to understand that taking breaks is nice. And like I said before, some people, they do recognize that most of their improvement does come from after they come from a break, because again, that's when your brain has kind of been able to withhold all information that you're able to get from not actually playing, because again, we're playing fighting games, right? So every match is just a stressful constant battle, right? So there's a lot of thinking and autopilot and things that go on. So it's kind of hard to take every single minute and very small intricacy and detail that goes into your character or a setup or a matchup. Or like sometimes you played a game for 10 years and something yesterday just came up randomly that you've never seen before in your life, so and you might just forget it in 10 minutes, so it takes a very disciplined person to kind of not, like, it's gonna be passionate, like Nick said, it's gonna be locked, but I think you're gonna be seeing a lot more success if you are willing to take that first to five and just leave it there, right, and then just learn from that instead of just trying to run a first 100. I think that's one of the reasons why I talked to Flash, Metroid, a few years ago when I was like really starting to get serious and decent at Strive, and he mentioned to somebody that he doesn't really like doing more than like first to five, because at a certain point there's just a wall that's just there, right? And I think that's kind of I kind of started doing that myself. I do seven usually. I think seven's also a decent number to go for, but I definitely don't go more than that with most people unless they're of the same bracket as me, because again, like they're kind of if they're too much better, I'm not really gonna be seeing anything up to a certain point, and vice versa if it's all the way around, right? So I think that's also something to take into account, is shorten your games so that you can actually withhold information, right? So I think I actually like that from Flash, because I've you can definitely see a lot of time when you're watching a long set, and it's kind of just, it's not just a wash, but it kind of just gets worse as it goes on. So you can just tell there's a wall being hit, and so that's usually when it's a good time to stop. Right. So that's, at least in terms of knowing when it's time to take a break and either play a different game or just like lab scenarios or something. Right. But not all of your learning has to be in a stressful set. Right. So where your mental can't really stand what exactly is happening or what you need to do, right? Especially in a scenario where you don't even have that much info or game knowledge to begin with to know where to go on. Um, I think yeah, that's just gonna be imperative for you to do. Um, Now, I guess back onto the topic of actually playing. Um, when you're in a stressful scenario of when you're actually like in a situation where you need to take a break or not take a break, but essentially take your time. Um, Take your time to actually read the situation, the scenario, and understand what you know about yourself and your opponent if you've been playing for that long, or if you just know offhand what your opponent is already like, right? Essentially, making it hard for your opponent to read you, which is important, right? Um, again, being able to kind of understand yourself. I think most importantly, I think we worry too much about other people. Now, I will say typically when you're starting to play off, you kind of just want to play your own game. That's kind of not what we're well, at least what I'm addressing here. I think it's because of a point in time where you start crossing that line, and then you kind of start worrying about other people. We see a lot of people, putting others on like pedestals, or starting getting afraid because they might know something, but they don't know you, right? Or even a scenario where you might have heard this person, or they might play a character that you're just afraid of. You know, make sure you're steady, playing the actual person, right? But not only that, but worry about what you can do and what you know, so that you can actually, take the next step into reading a situation with efficiency. Um, and making it hard for your opponent to read you. That's pretty much always rotating options, right? Whether that's defense, neutral, off your offense, making sure you're rotating and to make sure you're kind of not just autopiloting to a degree and just getting read for free, right? Now, obviously, sometimes it's they're gonna have that read and they're gonna be right, but at least they have to work for those reads instead of just knowing you're gonna do it. So I think that's kind of what this is kind of aiming towards. Most of us have caught ourselves pressing a bit too much. Sometimes retaining neutral is just the best play, essentially. Um, Whether it's you're kind of just again back to the corner, maybe you're just slamming on buttons, just antsy, wanting to get out, but you're essentially just giving free food to your opponent, right? When essentially you could just down back, wait for an opportunity to take your turn. They might have done like a overly committal move, try to run for a grab, right? So scenarios where you're essentially just kind of not even thinking about what's going on. You're just wanting to just get out of the corner, or vice versa. How I mentioned earlier in my earlier clip, right? Maybe you're just pressing too much, so your opponent can kind of just recognize, okay, so they're just really desperate to keep me in this wall, right? That's a scenario where it's just best to kind of just dial back. You see that a lot of Street Fighter actually, especially Street Fighter 6. They have their opponent cornered. They might go for a throw loop, but they might stand outside of like maybe their standing medium punch range or standing heavy kick range, or whichever one they is optimal for them. And they might wait to see, okay, do you dash out, do you jump out, and then react with either like an anti DP or just a jab or button drive rush, right? You see that a lot with high level Street Fighter. So I think that's also a um, pretty strong scenario to also look for how to optimize doing nothing in those scenarios where you really shouldn't be giving your opponent free eats. But yeah, anything you wanted to add to that, Nick?
Um, yeah, in Street Fighter, it's it's well not popular, but it's strategic to do something like a throw loop, for example, and you've pretty much conditioned your opponent. Okay, I'm gonna keep doing this throw loop until you tech me, or you're gonna press a button and interrupt me. That's pretty much what the throw looper wants the opponent in the corner to do. But the moment they stand outside of range, it tempts the opponent, and that's not necessarily doing nothing, but it's painting the picture for your opponent that to make them think you're not doing anything, but really you're spacing yourself out in order to counter you know uh, a quick normal that they might want to use to counter your throw loop or to push you out of the corner a little bit. So take into consideration how doing nothing may look like. It can look very different, as I mentioned before. It can look different per archetype, but it could also look differently visually. It could look like anything really. It's whatever you make of it. It could just be like walking back and forth. It could be walking forward and just holding back or holding down back. It could be like what Geefs typically do in Street Fighter. Just walk forward and then hold down back. Just walk your opponent down. It may look like nothing, but to the seasoned veteran, it's walking your opponent down. It's um pressure awaiting to happen. Um but also with with respect to Geef, I mean he's pretty much just he can take the chip, but he's waiting to see what stupid mistakes you're willing to commit to as he's trying to walk you down. So again, there's many different ways to position doing nothing. There's many ways to make your opponent think you're not doing anything. So you that's where a fighting gamer's creativity will come into play. You know, it doesn't just like one single thing. It could look like anything, and the fun that's where the fun comes from. You can create you can make it look like whatever you want. So yeah, that's all I want to say about that.
Yeah, all good, all good. Yeah. Yeah, I think. Yeah, yeah, pretty strong points. Um, yeah, back to uh making it hard for your opponent to read you because I feel like I could probably make it just sound a little bit more uh so a little bit more in detail, a little bit more elaborative. Um, but when it seems like your opponent has the complete read on you, it's probably because you're showing just a little bit too much. Whether that's attacking too much or decisions are just too predictable or too just on par with what they're used to. So again, breaking that rhythm and making it hard, right? So in music, there's a moment in silence and then boom, the drop, right? So whether that's I honestly I could probably even think of an example right now. Actually I can't. Well, it's not gonna mean anything to y'all. But I saw I heard a Solfego mix, right? I listen to a lot of mixes, whether it's like unreleased music, right, or a lot of stuff like that, right? Where they have like 30 minutes of a like unreleased songs from an artist, right? And it just goes just like this instrument, right? Playing for about 15 seconds in one of the most like nice patterns you've ever heard, right? And then just randomly the bass hits you and it like rattles your brain cells. I don't know how to explain it. It just sounded nice. Okay. Or like one of another guilty pleasure of mine is hearing guitar and rap and how people will have those remixes. So someone did one to a Yeet song. It was on live, right? So same thing, right? Guitar goes in, and you just hear the blue tag, sonic boom, right? So I was just like, okay, it's about to about to go crazy, right? And then same thing, right? The intro of the song plays, Yeet's going in, and then as soon as the song goes in, it's like if you play this in a car, the car's gonna break, right? Or if you if you play this at like a concert, all the speakers are gonna fall down, lights is shaking, they're gonna fall down. Everybody doing a mosh pit, like it's one of those, right? It's the same concept. So those are the hypest moments of the song. You never expect the drop bass on the silence that happened prior, right? So it's kind of the same concept of you want to just make it to where your opponent is having to even guess even more about what is about to take place, right? And I think that's an important aspect to go for that we're looking to drive home here. Um, but yeah, anything you wanted to add to that before we move on to the next topic? You got anything?
Yeah, on the note of just doing nothing, I think we're on the road of or on the path of explaining that it creates confusion for your opponent. You know, in the song analogy that you shared, the example there shows that it's confusing the listeners, but for a good reason. You know, it's unpredictability is what creates a good sequence of music. But in fighting games, the silence can create confusion in a good way for you, and then a bad way for your opponent. Doing nothing can help prevent you from unleashing too much information, as we discussed before. But I think what's more important than just information is unwarranted emotions and feelings. Because I think, I mean, sharing unwanted information is detrimental to to the game plan or gameplay, and may lead to your downfall if you share too much. But I think, especially in my time of playing different fighting games, Street Fighter, Marvel, Guilty Gear, Dragon Ball, reading the emotions of an opponent has become my own weapon, and I'm sure other top players can say the same when they've spot that, I guess, that hint of fear, or that hint of, they're like they're desperate, or that feeling of, like, they just want to get out of the corner. These are all emotions and feelings that we've seen before in fighting games, but again, doing nothing, at least from our perspective, um it can slowly help reel out those emotions and feelings. uh so that's, I just want to bring that up. Did you have anything to say about that?
I did have one thought, since we were talking about the music aspect as well, because I think another strong example is actually Tyler the
Oh,
Creator. Oh,
I think you're cutting out.
I am. Oh, hold on. Oh my days, hold on. I can fix that right now and then go back into my point. All right, cool. So yeah, I think another strong example is actually Tyler Creator. But before I get into that, I want to kind of try to paint a little bit of picture here. Now I'm kind of going out of a whim. I'm kind of mentally throttled right now, so it's gonna take me a minute, but I'm gonna try to paint a picture to kind of reel in the point I want to bring in here, so I can get Tyler Creator example, right? So I wanted to imagine, right, something that happened in a match, right? Matter of fact, I have a perfect example because this happens all the time for some odd reason, right? So, of course, me being primarily an Axel player in Guilty Gear Strive, right? He has a command grab that hits full screen, essentially, right? It hits full screen first and then travels all the way back to him, essentially, right? Pretty slow move. If you have enough experience, you can definitely see it, react to it, usually with a backdash, and then get a full screen punch depending on your character. But I think with this knowledge, now you kind of just rarely see it, right? Especially when you're playing, one of the high level actions. But I think some people spend their time, in too much of, tower or park where Axels love to use this move, right? So the picture is, picture yourself now in a scenario where you have fought enough Axels to where most Axels are probably gonna throw this move out eventually, right? So, but you just find this one Axel, right? Maybe it's a tournament, maybe it's a park again, whatever. For this case, let's just use a tournament, I guess, right? So you play the whole set, right? It's a game 5, it's a back and forth set, right? But you come to realize that they have not used the command grab at all, right? Maybe you haven't. Most people don't, right? Maybe like game 3 or 4, probably earlier. You're like, wow, this asshole does not use command grab, right? Now what if game 5 they go for classic close slash into Tiger Knee Axel Bomber, 2H OTG, and instead of going for the BNB or the optimal BNB, which is going to be for the meaty Circle Flash, they go for instead the command grab, and you're just like, whoa, right? And then they never do it again for the rest of the game, rest of the set, right? Now, example here is Tyler the Creator actually uses this in some of his songs, right? I can't remember the name of the song off the top of my head for some odd reason because I literally just heard it the other day, right? But sometimes he will have a moment in the song, right? Or particularly in whether it's the beat or the instrumentation of the song, right? That will only play once for a moment, and then you will never hear it for the rest of the song, right? And it's because, life in general is about moments, right? Sometimes you experience something extremely happy for yourself or something sad, right? And but it's only live for that one moment in your life. It's only gonna be it's gonna happen for like that hour, that 2 hours, that 10 minutes, right? Or I guess in this case, it was about 11 seconds, right? And it's never gonna happen again, right? You will never, even if you might go to that amusement park that you love, and you might have like the most fun you ever had, right? You can go again for sure, right? But you're not gonna experience the same interactions, the same experiences, right? Which I think is kind of the point. Is another point too. Is even if you have a scenario where you set up a habit, right? You gave your opponent information that, okay, I'm not gonna use the command grab, right? Because I know it's a death sentence. But what if, right? So now maybe it's for the win that you just randomly get command grabbed. Maybe it's for a random dumb spot in game three. We don't know, right? So I think that's gonna be that's a nice spot to where you want to make it difficult to read your opponent and not do the thing that you always do, or maybe instead of going for the single flash OTG, again you might just like dash up, like Nick said. Zanky plays like want to walk up. Sometimes I want to dash up to my optimal range, right? So I'll go for the OTG and I'll push up, right? And then I'll just wait to see, okay, do you IAD? Do you wake up backdash? Do you just block? Cool, right? So that is just balancing your rhythm, balancing your options, which is essentially going to be the driving point here. Now, same thing with a battle. In the healer battle, waiting for your opponent to react can give you significant advantage, especially when they don't know they're waiting for a reaction. So same thing, right? Sometimes some people will walk back and forth in neutral. We see this a lot in most of Street Fighter, but it's a common thing in a lot of games at a high level, right? They will essentially walk back and forth, and just their opponent does not know that they're waiting for a reaction, waiting for something to whiff and then whiff punish, or waiting for a move to super. We see that a lot with Johnny's, well, some Johnnies in Guilty Gear Strive. They will wait for a reaction and then churn his Joker Trick super for a full screen super punish, right? So same concept, right? We don't know, so on their end they have to tread with caution, right? But they don't know that you're exactly doing that, so it's not like it's a common thing for them to just exactly just hold forward in scenario, which I think that is kind of the main point on this topic here. But Nick, did you want to add anything in terms of whether it's rotating options, or even just what the current topic is, which is just waiting for your opponent to react for an advantage?
Um, yeah, you know what? I think it's such a simple concept, and I want to circle back all the way to the beginning of this podcast. But we mentioned doing nothing isn't just it may seem like a simple thing, but it can be really difficult depending on the person. As we mentioned on the podcast last week, it starts with awareness, and I don't think, well, actually, it's very hard to develop this awareness of like remembering not to do anything. And we see it all the time, when people forget not to do anything, they just they just keep going. They don't have a they just have gas to they have gas at 100 at all times. And sometimes it can work out. We've seen people at the higher ranks that got there just from pressing all the buttons and not stopping. There's people like that, and they've figured out how to go at 100 and do well at like the higher ranks or of whatever game. But the moment we get into competitive play, what differentiates, the top players from the average or the above average is that they're first, or the sorry, not first. They're aware that at some point they're probably going to meet someone that has substantial counterplay against them, is giving them a lot of issues, or they just don't have a solution for. And so this brings me to my point of, we have to remember the very obvious things. We have attacking, we have defending, and we don't always remember that we don't have to do either of those things, especially when we're stumped. And there isn't one fighting game player that hasn't been stumped. We've always been stumped one way or another, um, in front of different players, against different players. We've always, one time or another, we felt completely um, defenseless against certain people. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we have to learn what we can weaponize, because if we showcase all of our weapons and all of our counterplay, then there's no more gas in the tank, and we can't really. There's no sight of winning in the long run. So by expanding our weaponry and weaponizing things that not a lot of people think are weapons, like doing nothing, for example, we're able to have the advantage over average players, over above average players, even high level players. People, even the high level people, forget um, that doing nothing is a strategy. Um, Not that they don't know, but maybe they're just not used to it, or their gameplay is more rushed down, more uh, they're determined to be at 100 at all times, which again is fine. But the person with more tools, with more weapons, typically comes out on top. And so that's just my recommendation. Again, there's attacking, there's defending, but there's so many other weapons that we can use in our arsenal, and doing nothing is one of them. It may sound stupid, but trust me, you're going to find people that understand this concept very, very well, and I invite you to um, really study how they do it, because they're going to do it in very specific ways, in their own ways that work out for them. So that's just all I want to say, which is weaponize doing nothing, uh, because it's all part of the mind games and all part of the process, and psychologically throwing off your opponent. You have to learn all the tools, and then once you've learned all the tools, once you've learned them and then taken a break after learning them and absorb the information, then you can use the tools, then you can refine the tools, and then you can master the tools. It's all a part of the fighting game journey. And as we mentioned in the previous podcasts, one time or another, all these tools can be used in real life too. So make sure to develop your skill set, your tool set, and you'll see just how powerful these tools are once you refine them. Do you have anything to say about that,
Yeah,
Wyatt?
yeah. I actually wanted to add to the point of when you said that some players kind of just thrive off, you know, pedal to the metal, balls to wall, just all gas, even through ranked matches and stuff like that. It kind of get far. I also want to point out that that could be strong and much stronger if they balance that constant aggression with whether they just sit still for 2 seconds, right? Like what if they're fighting somebody and their opponent's just like, okay, this guy is just a nut, and they're just gonna just constant on go the entire time, not gonna let off the brakes. All right, I know what to do about this, and then you just stop. You know, it's that's kind of this kind of thing. We can go back to making it hard for your opponent to read you, making it hard to kind of have them gather intel, because now they can be stumped. Now they have to guess. Okay, well they just know how to actually balance their playstyle. And okay, are they gonna DP here? Now they're getting frantic in their own mind because you just changed from having smashing your kneecaps with the buttons, then to just sitting still for even a second, right? So I think I just wanted to add that to your to the point because I actually thought that was a pretty good touch that I think a lot of people kind of don't understand. Is that you are able to balance your game plan to have it to what you want it to be, but just switch it up to again make it difficult for your opponent. But that's all I wanted to add.
Yeah. I don't want to speak too much about that because again, the concept of doing nothing is a very simple thing, and I don't want to add too much and
Yeah.
potentially over exaggerate it. And so, well, I'll just leave it at that. But um, I did want to share an example, and I'll show it on uh in post. But there was a recent Street Fighter League match that perfectly conveyed um this concept that we're talking about of doing nothing, and it was between Ending Walker and Angry Bird. And long story short, it's it's them trying to read each other, but in a way where it really is just them doing nothing. Ending Walker is seen just pacing back and forth, waiting for Angry Bird to, I'm assuming, make the first move because he's always dedicating himself to drive rush jab, or some sort of drive rush to maintain advantage. And then you have Angry Bird literally just holding down back, waiting for Ending Walker to make the first move instead. It may seem like nothing makes sense when you're looking at it from a perspective where, like, okay, these guys are literally just standing there. But really, when you start to think about the characters they're using, the type of players they are, the accolades these gentlemen have, uh, the matches they've had prior to this moment, and their potency for using, or their character potency, and and the skills they have with that character and character knowledge, you start to understand, okay, these guys aren't just doing anything. These guys are literally preparing for whatever's to come, and they're they're estimating what might happen. Like, Ending Walker is estimating that uh Angry Bird might drive rush, and Angry Bird is hoping that Ending Walker gets impatient, I'm assuming. But at the end of the day, doing nothing is what allows for these moments. And um in these moments of drawing out potential actions from your opponent, making your opponent break out the first move can provide a lot of information. And I think players of all skill levels, but mostly like average and below, undermine this idea where they always want to make the first move. They always want to go, gas to 100 first. They always want to, land the first hit first. They want to land the first mix up first. They want to land the first combo first, whatever, what have you. They want to look good in front of the crowd first. But the issue with all of this is that whatever from that list, whatever you dedicate yourself to, if you're doing it first, you're offering up a lot of information. For example, um, how soon are they breaking out the first move? So like the time it takes for them to actually do something. This can reveal a lot of information. How eager are they? Are they patient? Maybe not. Uh, is it consistent each round? So at 95 seconds, are they committing to a normal or around that time frame? That can give you a lot of information too. They're consistent with their cadence. They're consistent with their internal tempo. Internal tempo. That's something we should get into as well. I don't think a lot of people understand tempo. But anyways, um, are they eager to commit to certain moves each round, and are they the same? Are they patient? Maybe not. But all these decisions are what will reveal these emotions, these feelings that they may have. Their impatience, or their patience, or their, I guess, their overdose of patience. Like they're too patient, or maybe they're fearful. Uh, Other things to consider. What type of entry are they committing to the moment the round starts? Like, what are they doing? Do they really want the first hit, or are they backing up? Uh, are they trying to are they trying to make me budge? Are they waiting for me to make a move? Are they baiting me? with all these questions in mind, the first move can reveal the answers to some of these questions, if not all of these questions. And so, a message to not just average and below, but all players, being patient, doing nothing, allowing for your opponent to break out the first move or set of moves can make or break the rest of the match, the rest of the set, the rest of the tournament. So just take this into consideration in understanding the concept of doing nothing. That's all I want to say. Again, I don't want to overcomplicate this very simple concept. So that's all I had to say. But Riot, if you had anything to extend off that, by
Yeah.
all means.
I guess the funny thing is that I think we don't really have a choice, because again, like, it is simple, but it's one of the more foreign concepts to go over. And again, it's just, even still, it's simple, but there's also different avenues that you can go from doing nothing, right? We talked about very specific scenarios, like mid game, mid fight. We talked about the first move that could be round start, right? That could be the very beginning. We talked about real life, right? Taking IRL base from actually playing the game. But I think with that as well, we're talking a lot about information. In it, while we are sitting here, essentially, breaking down the fact that doing nothing can essentially help prevent you from unleashing not too much unwanted information, or feelings. But I think on the other end of the spectrum, thinking too much about these can lead to burnout, right? So when you're on burnout, that's pretty much when you're just straight autopilot. Even if you try your hardest, I've definitely been here many times since I know to stop, right? You have, even if you try your hardest to adapt or think about a specific scenario, you just can't get your fingers to do it. You can't get your mind to stay on that, which I think that's when you kind of just have to sit back and take that IRL break, right? Now, I will say, I know Nick talked about earlier about all these questions that you should be asking yourself during the game about what happens when your opponent does the first move, but that will it will come with time, to when again, game with experience and game knowledge, to where you don't really have to ask yourself this like immediately, to where now I think you get enough time, enough reps thinking about these questions and be able to answer them off rip and kind of be able to adapt, to where you reach burnout later than before. So it's not like you should kind of be able to lock yourself up from burnout like immediately, because I feel like, in my opinion, that burnout it just happens when you have just like reached a mental limit of being able to process things, right? So taking the IRL break and having the burnout goes hand in hand, as well as all this information that we're dropping tonight, right? Because eventually, even if you're the highest level of players, right? Like, you're gonna reach a point to where it's gonna be hard to retain that information, or adapt real time, no matter how you try, right? So I think that's gonna be the biggest thing when it comes to dealing with the unwarranted information or feelings that you may have, and then also how to avoid the burnout feeling, which is something that really is going to happen. It's inevitable, especially if you're going to be grinding a lot. But nonetheless, it's going to just add to the disadvantage that your opponent is going to have over you. But yeah, I think that's all I really wanted to talk about in terms of that.
Yeah, I think that's all we really had. We it's already been an hour.
Yeah.
I mean, if anything, I did want to mention. I mean, I still have. Well, I haven't been playing fighting games recently, but
You can go ahead.
I guess last time when I was active, I still do, or did, I guess, have issues with doing nothing, and I've only realized the importance of it later on because of watching other people. Um, Even just seeing someone like a rushdown player do their thing and then all of a sudden just stand still and then absorb the information and then continue their gameplay. It's always intrigued me, and I'm glad we covered this this segment.
Yeah, that actually reminds me too. I guess a personal experience that's to even I guess my first ever um, idea or realization of the concept of what we're talking about tonight. There's actually a few instances, right? It took a few times, which is kind of proves the point of how simple it is, yet how foreign it is at the same time, right? During my quest of improvement in Guilty Gear Strive early on launch, I fought three players. I fought Kizzy K, Princess Slim, and Flash Metroid, as mentioned earlier, right? I fought Kizzy K first within like a month or two, I want to say, after the game came out. And essentially, one of his most important points to me was that I tried too much to attack, right? I was kind of just throwing buttons out. Of course, I'm playing a zoner, so I can't really afford to do that, especially in Guilty Gear Strive, where zoning isn't really the strongest. Uh, Especially in modern fighting games right now, it's definitely not strong at all. But in a game where it is still strong to kind of be on the passive end, I tried to attack, right? Granted, I knew what he was saying, I heard it, but I don't know, it just didn't click, right? I fought Princess Slim a few months after. It was a coaching session, so I cashed after some money, and then she reviewed a VOD of mine. That actually we did I think it was a first to 10 mirror match, I think. And same thing, right? It's pretty much I'm kind of just throwing stuff out. Sometimes I'm like not pressing where I should be, because we see that a lot, right? Players we mentioned earlier how players just balls to the wall, right? They press every single place imaginable except where they need to, right? That was more or less me. Same thing, right? It was more so kind of getting more knowledge about Axel in general as well as the game, because I did submit a VOD review. I think it was me fighting a Zato. I think, right? It was Jimmy Bones, actually. I remember I was fighting Jimmy Bones. Yeah, fun times. But yeah, then after that, when I finally had the realization, right, when it finally clicked, it was actually Flash Metroid. I don't remember everything he said, but I do know he said pretty much what Kizzy said, but in a way that I kind of in a right way, as essentially, right. If you know, right. But it was the same. I try too hard to do things, right. Sometimes you gotta do nothing and actually zone, right. Because at that time, Flash also did play Axel, but he was on another character, right. I think he was learning Kai at that time, but he was still on off of Axel, so he kind of just knew, right. So same thing, right. I try to attack. I don't really zone. I don't really, assess the situation. I don't play slow when I need to, and I also don't convert well into my combos, right. So even then, I say this is the moment it clicked, but it actually wasn't the total time where it clicked. It actually clicked in a bracket run, a week after. Right, I was in Bamboo Battles. I think it was one of the last consoles I ever did before I got my laptop. Right, so I was fighting a Jacko. I was in losers already. I got knocked out pretty early. I was fighting a Jacko. I think there it was Marquise. Chill guy, strong Jacko. But pretty much same thing. I want to say I was up to. Actually no, I'm dumb. I was down 0-2, right? I was down 0-2, right? And I just had. I don't even know how to explain it without sounding weird. It was legit an epiphany, right? I had Flash Metroid just flicker in my brain, telling me exactly what he told me in the training session. And I thought about it. And I was like, you know what? Okay, let me actually do this. So from then on, I kind of just, play more mid range and poke out. Use more 6K on reaction. Use more 2S on reaction. Use more 5P on reaction. Right? Same thing. I'm reacting a lot more rather than just preempting. So I think that's kind of for me when I had the realization of, doing nothing is strong. Even in a game, well, I didn't know at the time, obviously, at this point, but in a game where it's kind of more enforced to hold forward, right? It is still strong because since everybody wants to hold forward, you can be that person, you can be that wall that stops them, right? So that was kind of my realization of why doing nothing is essentially important. So I think that's actually my last point. Unless you had anything you wanted to add, Nick, before we head out of here and close.
Yeah, you know what? I forgot to mention this, but the more we talk about this, I feel like it isn't just the concept of doing nothing. I think what we've really talked about is the concept of doing nothing, but also the concept of doing less.
Yes.
So, and I think they should, I mean, they definitely do, but they should represent two different things, but they're very close to the main concept, which is doing less of what you're used to in order to throw off your opponent. And we've talked about that significantly. It's not just about throwing off your opponent, but it's also depriving them of information. It's also about making them make the first move so that you get more information. It's all about weaponizing the idea of doing nothing or doing less. Um, and I guess that this will act as like the recap. So on that note, uh, what we discussed today, we've talked extensively about um, doing nothing in regards to taking time to read the situation, um, not pressing too many buttons after you maybe came off of an episode of pressing just way too much. We've talked about being burned out and thus learning how to take a break. Um, we've also touched upon doing nothing and just letting things flow, letting things just take its course, letting things just come to be, and we react off that, and we form our game plan around that. We've talked about allowing the mind to take a break as well, and its importance, because it takes time to receive information and for the brain to absorb it and form connections. Um, Not giving your opponent too much information, not giving your opponent too much information on your emotions, your feelings, and just information in general, and vice versa. You want that from your opponent. And was there anything I missed, Riot?
I don't think so. That was pretty much all the things we covered today, involving just assessing the situation rather than doing something. So, or doing more. I guess is a better way to put it, as you said.
Yeah, exactly. So again, simple concept, but in understanding this concept, any player can weaponize it and add it to their arsenal of attacking, defending, mix-ups, rush down, generating different types of game plans. Doing nothing, doing less, it can be a part of that.
Yeah, for sure. With that being said, once again, this is a 623 podcast where we encourage listeners to wake up to new ways of thinking about fighting games. Check us out on I believe it's the Basement X Gaming YouTube channel where these are getting posted. Just go ahead and hit the exclamation point 623. I want to say in the chat, in Twitch chat below, for all the live visual viewers. For audio viewers, I think we're gonna be on Spotify more consistently now, if I'm not mistaken.
We're on Spotify now.
So with that being said, go and check us out. Follow us on our socials on the top corners if you do so choose. Support us as well. Make sure y'all tune in next week for our next episode. It'll be I don't know what we're gonna do yet, but we're gonna find out right now. With that being said, go ahead and rate out Once again, thank y'all for tuning in. So follow us on our socials, and see y'all next time for tuning in. And peace out.
Peace.